Welcome back to the I Am More Than podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Wessel. I'm a former Miss Arizona USA professional model and founder of More Than Inc. Many of you may know this week's guest from pageantry, but she is so much more than Miss USA. She's a pageant and life coach, a woman's self-defense instructor, a role model, a wife, a woman of faith, a sister, and a friend. From living in a women's shelter to representing the USA on a national level, she's faced every challenge in her life with faith, grace, and persistence. In this episode, we talk about her upbringing, martial arts, her pageant experience, toxic relationships, mental health, confidence, and tangible self-defense tips. This woman has inspired me for years, and I'm so excited for you to get to know her on a much deeper level. Please welcome my dear friend, Miss USA 2014, Nia Sanchez. Welcome to the I Am More Than podcast, Nia. I can't believe you're finally here.
I know. I'm so excited to do this chat with you.
I know. I was thinking today while we were getting ready that it was about a year ago that you were visiting New York, and I remember telling you, like, hey, I want to launch this company, and if I ever have a podcast, will you be a guest? So the fact that it's like coming full circle and you're actually here a year later, it's a very cool moment.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I remember you were telling me the whole process, how it works to create your company, create your business. And yeah, now we're finally here a year later. This is crazy.
I know. It's so crazy. And a little backstory for all of our listeners. Nia and I met when we were competing for Miss USA. And obviously, if you know Nia, she won Miss USA 2014. And we really became close friends after that process. And the more I got to know Nia and just get to know her story, she's an incredible woman. She's such a great role model. And I'm really excited for this audience to be able to get to know her because I think you'll learn a ton. So I want to talk about life before Miss USA, just because I feel like so many people know you with that chapter and after. So take me back to what was life like before you ever got into pageantry?
So if we go all the way back to my childhood, because I feel like there are, for a lot of people, moments in your life that really define who you are, define your perspective. So one of those moments for me was when my parents divorced, got separated. I was between the ages of like 6 and 7 during that process. And my life really got flipped upside down because there was not a lot of option for stability during that time. So some people may know this, some people may not, maybe your listeners don't, but I lived in a women's shelter with my mom. When she left my dad, she was a stay-at-home mom. So she had no income of her own to pull from. So we lived in a women's shelter. We slept on couches. We pitched tents in people's backyards just while she was trying to get her feet underneath her. And it took a little bit of time. She eventually did, and everything was okay. But that completely flipped my world upside down, those months of just being around strangers in scary places to a child that seemed scary. So I became an extreme introvert. I did not want to make eye contact with anybody. I looked at my feet when I walked down the street, it was completely different than how I was before. And then if you fast forward a little bit, another part of my story that definitely is a part of who I am is joining martial arts. My dad saw how extremely introverted I was, and he worked in a prison. He was in the military. He saw the benefits of discipline and group activity, but he also saw some of the scariest people in our state and knew that as his only girl, I needed to have confidence. I needed to be able to be aware of my surroundings and all of that. So he put me into martial arts, and that really helped bring me out of my shell, give me more confidence. And I think of my childhood, those are the biggest things that stand out to me that help kind of create who I am and give me perspective on life.
I think a lot of people still stereotype pageant women. And I love that you completely shatter that because you don't fit into that box. You've been so philanthropic because of what you went through living in a women's shelter. And I'm sure that was such a defining moment for you. And it's funny when you say you were an introvert because I know Nia now. And I'm like, there was a time you were an introvert? That's crazy.
Oh, girl, extreme.
That's so funny to me. And especially, you've competed in pageantry multiple times and been on national television multiple times. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really cool that martial arts was a tool for you to totally be able to gain that confidence. And you're now a coach for, is it martial arts or what are you a coach specifically for?
Yes. So as you mentioned, being in martial arts has definitely turned into something that's now a passion and what I love to do. So it's been everything from teaching women self-defense and women's shelters. A lot of women in shelters come from abusive relationships, scary backgrounds and circumstances that they're trying to escape. So giving them that confidence is really something that I have a passion for. I also teach their kids like fun little stranger danger classes. We make games out of it, but it's really teaching little children how to be aware of their circumstances, what type of people are good or bad people to avoid, how to use their voice. Often children that are with parents that are escaping danger, they like myself become very introverted and they don't know even how to use their voice. So I teach kids how to be able to vocalize, stop, stranger, you're not my mom, you're not my dad, instead of just, screaming if someone were to come and try to approach them. So I do that side of it, but I also, like you said, the coach part, I teach women's self-defense classes all across the country and even world, and I really love it. It's something that I think every single woman should experience, no matter her background, because the reality of the world that we live in is it's not perfect. And I think I'd rather have a woman feel confident and prepared to defend herself. God forbid something did happen to her.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the most important things that you can know. Just because I think women, a lot of times we can see stuff, whether it's on social media or on TV, on the news, about what we should do. Mm-hmm. But I'm assuming that when you're actually in that situation, there's a moment where you just completely freeze, right?
It's funny because people used to always say it's fight or flight, but the real reaction is fight, flight, or freeze. So exactly what you said. Sometimes we're stunned, we're shocked, we're scared, and we just don't move. And so a lot of what I teach, first of all, is being aware of situations and aware of what's going on around you to prevent an attack in the first place to the best of our ability. But God forbid there's a physical contact, a physical confrontation. I teach women how to escape multiple different types of attackers and scenarios. So yeah, it's very natural to freeze or run or try to defend yourself. But even if you're trying to defend yourself and you don't know what to do, it can be harder to escape. No matter what, I always tell women this in my class, that no matter what happens, you did the 100% best with what tools you had in your belt at the time. And my job is just to add more tools to your belt if possible, to make sure you feel prepared in any way possible.
And I know there's a lot of people that do carry pepper spray. I know when I was living in New York, that was something that my mom was always like, you have to have your pepper spray on you. But I was never trained, so I don't actually know how to use that. Is there anything else that you recommend for women to be carrying around with them if they ever feel unsafe, that's actually a tool that we can use without going through the training?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you asked that. I think we always switch coasts when you and I are traveling to a place. Like,
always.
Last time I was in New York teaching a class, you were in LA and vice versa. It ends up happening that way. But I love that you use pepper spray or have that. I have a question for you. Have you ever actually sprayed it? Have you sprayed it in the air? Or do you just have it in case?
Never.
The reason I ask is because so often we have these tools that are really actually very wonderful and great and can help protect us and scare off, an attacker. But as a woman, if you've never sprayed pepper spray, say out in the air, the things to be aware of is it's spray. It can blow back on you depending on the wind. And if you've never even experienced how that feels, it could be a shock to you as much as it might be to an attacker. And then it could cause you to freeze even more because then you're in pain. So I'm not saying go out and spray yourself, girls. I am saying go out into an open air space where you can spray pepper spray, and a little bit of that may be something that you inhale or a little bit at some point, and you want to know just how that is to spray it in the air, how it works, how far it goes, all of those things. You don't want to spray your pepper spray from too far of a distance and the one that you have doesn't go far enough. So all of those things are really important to just kind of test out before you are in a circumstance where you need to actually use it and be effective.
That's so good to know. So good to know. I wasn't even planning on asking that, but I'm I need all the knowledge I can get before I get to one of your classes.
Exactly. And there's other things that I'm sure many of us women, I know you have a lot of women listening that have heard, carry your keys between your knuckles in case someone tries to attack you, and you can have that as a weapon. I even think a simple cell phone. I hold on to a cell phone really hard when with a strong grip when I am by myself, especially if I'm walking at night, because imagine how physically hard your cell phones are. If you hit someone in the eye, across the nose, in the throat with all your power with your cell phone, that's going to cause a lot of pain. So things like that, you can use just things that you have on you to be able to defend yourself.
And let's say the attacker was a male. Is it smart for us? I know we try and kick the groin area, but I also know that sometimes that can backfire because they're expecting it. So what would you suggest? Do we go high or do we go low?
Ooh, I love it. Okay, so there's so many things that I discuss in my workshops, and it's because there's so many different scenarios and things to be prepared for. For example, maybe your attacker is on drugs or alcohol, and their senses are not as heightened as you normally are. They're kind of dull. So maybe if you hit someone and they're heightened because of something they've taken, they may not even feel it as much as a normal person would. So every situation is different. But the soft targets, this is what you're asking about. The soft targets are targets to be very important to be aware of. So, of course, you're growing, or the man's growing, that's important, but also eyes, ears, throat, those kind of places where you can attack someone, and no matter how strong they are, it's still going to hurt. So imagine if you had someone attacking you and they have six-pack abs and maybe they've been hit plenty of times. So a punch to the stomach from a smaller woman who maybe doesn't even have practice or experience punching or hitting something is going to do absolutely nothing to their stomach. They're not going to feel it. They're not going to be affected. But no matter how strong they are, if you, and I'm sorry for your listeners, it gets a little extreme, but if you try to pull out their eyes or gouge at their eyes, that's going to cause them pain no matter how strong they are. So knowing those places that can be really effective, no matter how strong someone is. So the nose, the nose, the eyes, the growing, like you said, the throat, those kind of areas can definitely cause that moment of pain that can create a window for you to escape.
Take notes, ladies. I wasn't even planning on diving into this, but it's very important.
Right? It's important.
Very important. And so from martial arts, you're gaining your confidence. And then how do you make that transition into pageantry?
It is the weirdest transition.
So weird. And I love it.
Because I was definitely always like girly and feminine, but I really later in life started to embrace like the Taekwondo martial art, just lifestyle. So when I would compete, I would not wear any makeup. I would pull my hair into the tightest pony, try to look as intimidating as possible. So people would be afraid of me when we're competing and, all that kind of stuff. So I was like, no makeup. I want to put fear into your heart kind of person. And then transferring over to pageant world, you have to be, which was another side of me. It's not like I was a naturally super intimidating person. The other side of me of just really expressing who I am, the passion, all of that. So the transition happened. I actually did 2 pageants when I was younger, 13 years old, and I fell in love with it. But because of my family background at the time and what we had going on, my family didn't have any time or energy to bring me to any pageants, events, appearances, or even to pay for the competition. So I had to wait until I was 18 and could pay for it on my own. So I started back up when I was 18, 19 years old. And that whole journey was a crazy one as well. But as I think and maybe your listeners don't know, it took 5 years of competing for me before qualifying to compete for Miss USA.
That's perseverance right there. And I think there's a lot of women that either they do it and they get very discouraged and don't come back, or there's women like you that are like, oh, I can get better and better and better. Let me keep trying. What was that fire keeping you going?
I think for me, it's something that if you have a passion for something, not letting discouragement or bad moments get you down and just continuing to strive for what you want. So one of the perspectives that I really enjoy on life, like I think so much of our life is just about our mental perspective, is you look at disappointment as a part of life and something that's expected. So it's not as much of an emotional letdown when there's disappointment, when something goes wrong. You're like, oh, that's part of life. I'm going to learn from it and I'm going to get better. So for me, it's just that perspective that I tried so hard to have. I was not perfect at it at all when I was a kid, or younger, my late teens, early 20s. But when I had a disappointment, to try my best to look at it like, oh, this is supposed to happen. Like life is not perfect. I'm going to just embrace this disappointment, embrace this failure, and just become better from it. So I think the perspective really helped me keep going.
I love that. How did that get ingrained in you? Is that something your parents were teaching you, or did you just kind of pick it up and just live by that motto?
Honestly, a lot of it was my faith. I'm a very faith-based person, as you know. We connect on that a lot. And there's just so many things for me in the Bible that say, like, life is not going to be perfect, but God is with you no matter what, even through the hard times. So I feel like there's that eternal and that biblical kind of point of view if you look for it in the Bible. And that was something that just kind of resonated with me through my faith, but also just in my personal life. And I was able to kind of transform that into everything that I do. It's like, hey, it happens. No big deal. We're just going to keep working harder and we're going to learn from it.
I love that. And you had touched on faith there. And I think it's important. I don't know if you even know this, but I was in an interesting area with my faith after Miss USA when we had started our friendship. And there was always something so different about Nia. Like, you're just a unique person and you radiate so much joy and love. And I remember having a conversation with you asking where that comes from. And you talked about your faith. And I think you were such an incredible part of my journey, bringing me back to my own faith and belief in God and trying to live life according to what the Bible says. And I think you were such a huge influence on that. So, quick note, wanted to thank you for that, because I think there's definitely something different about you that everybody can see. And I think it all comes back to that. It all comes back to faith.
It totally does. And oh, thanks for saying that, girl. And
Of course.
I love it. Then we both connect over like Hillsong, New York, and all these things that we connect with. And that's always a lot of fun.
I know. We've had so much fun as our friendship has grown over the past, 6, 7 years.
Crazy. Time flies. Oh my goodness.
It's so crazy. And so you were Miss Nevada USA when you went to Miss USA. So when you did win that time, that was what, your 5th time going out for the pageant?
That was my 5th year competing overall. I had taken a year kind of a little bit off. I had competed for a local title, but I skipped 1 year competing at the state level. So as many people might know, I competed in California. Then I moved to Hong Kong, and then I came back to the U.S. and I moved to Nevada, took 1 year off competing at the state level, and then competed for Nevada and went to Miss USA.
And won. That's the coolest part, is it just shows your perseverance. And then becoming Miss USA, did you have any idea how to prepare yourself for the possibility that you would be crowned when you showed up at Miss USA?
And competing for Miss USA and just like the mental preparedness was for me a lot of discipline. I think like mental discipline and my thoughts are just something that is so important. And I realized was really important before competing. So I started that journey before Nevada, truly loving myself and getting to the mental place of, you know what, I'm going to be the truest version of me. And I really hope that that's what the judges are looking for. And if it is, I'm ready for the title. But if it's not, that's also okay. But I always tell girls that I coach, like, you're not ready to win until you're ready to lose. So I feel like I was right in that sweet spot where I was ready to win. I prepared myself for what I knew that the job of Miss USA was, but I was also ready to lose if it wasn't in God's plan for me. So I love good, easy takeaways that I feel like, you know, your listeners can say, ooh, I'm going to do that. So obviously not every single person listening is getting ready for Miss USA, but no matter what it is in life, if you're getting ready for something important, whether it's your wedding or job or going to college or moving, like there's so many important moments in our life. One of the things that helped me the most when, for me, getting ready for Miss USA was reading the book and actually listening to it via audiobook, Your Best Life Now by Joel Osteen. Have you read that one, Jordan?
I haven't, and I need to, because I know you've told me about this before.
Oh, it's life changing. It is so good. And as I will probably mention 1,000 times as we're speaking, your mental space and thoughts are so important. And it was very important for me. So yes, Your Best Life Now by Joel Osteen. I feel like that's what really helped prepare me for being Miss USA.
I don't think many people, myself included, went into it with that much control over my own mindset. And I think being in a competition like that, you never really know how you're going to respond. And when you're rooted so much in what you believe, just like you were, I think it's so much easier to just roll with the punches, you know? And your grasp on mental health and you knowing the importance of it, where did that come from?
And that came from a lot of emotional and mental issues when I was younger. Let me tell you, I feel like all that I've been through emotionally, whether was really bad relationships or even my relationship with my dad a little bit earlier in my life, like our relationship is great now, but it wasn't always great. emotionally and mentally. All of those really hard times taught me how important it was to be in control of my thoughts. So it was kind of like a trial and error kind of thing. I would stumble and fall so many times. And I realized that when I was in a good place, when I was being intentional with my thoughts, that's what made me stronger. And another thing, and I don't mean to always go back to my faith, but it's just such a part of who I am. My faith was a big part of that. I remember as a teenager, I'm sure most teenagers butt heads with their parents, and my dad and I would be in an argument, in a fight. He would be yelling at me, telling me to go to my room, whatever it is. And instead of dwelling on the thoughts of, oh, I'm pissed at my dad, this and that happened, instead of that, I would go into prayer and I would say, thank you, God, for the roof over my head. Thank you that I'm a person that has a bed to sit on when I'm sent to my room, where I know so many people around the world don't even have that. So an attitude of gratitude was definitely something that I learned at a young age, that no matter what the circumstances are, you can still be positive. You can choose that attitude of gratitude, and it can really just change your life.
Yeah, it absolutely can. And I think growing up with all the experiences that you went through and having that knowledge at such a young age, I'm sure has helped you in so many ways, because no matter what's thrown at you now, you really know how to handle it, just because your mental foundation and your faith is so strong. Do you agree with that?
Agreed. Choose joy. And it's so funny because sometimes I do get a little attitudey or complainy, as I'm sure we all have in 2020. It's a
Yes.
crazy year. And Daniel will remind me, and he'll be like, hey, don't you always say choose joy? And I'm like, oh yeah. Okay. I need to take my own medicine, listen to my own advice. But being intentional with choosing joy, no matter the circumstances, is so powerful. It's really powerful.
It really is. And you had mentioned a toxic relationship in there. I think you had told me a little bit prior to Miss USA, and there's a lot of our listeners here that either have been in a toxic relationship or know somebody that is. If you could give advice to yourself when you were in that relationship, what are some things that you would say?
This is a great question. I'm going to give a little bit of background, if that's okay, so people
Please do.
understand.
Yeah, please do.
And I think it will help because maybe some girls can relate to this. So relationship. I was in a very unhealthy relationship with a man that was like maybe too many years older than me. I think he was about 11 years older than me. So that should have been a red flag in the beginning. And that's not to say that relationships that are that far apart don't work out. There are plenty that do, and I've seen plenty of happy marriages. It just was not good for me. So this man, the toxic part of the relationship was that there was a lot of infidelity, and at a certain point, I thought I was going to be strong. I found out he cheated on me. We broke up. And then 2 months later, after 2 months straight of him begging and telling me all that he's changed at a young age, I didn't have the strength to say no. And I was like, okay, maybe he really has changed. We'll try it one more time. That one more time turned into 7 or 8 more times where I found so many moments that there was infidelity. And towards the end of the relationship, it got really verbally abusive, and then even got really physically aggressive towards the very, very end of the relationship, where he laid his hands on me, grabbed my arms so aggressively that there was a handprint bruise on my arm of his finger, like impression. So it got really bad over the span of 1 year, kind of like a snowball, but a bad snowball. So just a little background, because I know a lot of women may struggle if they're in a bad relationship with, well, what if he's really changed? What if it's going to be different this time? So if I was giving advice to myself earlier on, I would tell myself to think about what, and I'm so sorry, I keep going back to God, but it's such a big part of my life, is that, like, what does God want for you? If you're not a person of faith, then like, what do you deserve? Everyone deserves to be loved, to be cherished, to be valued. And I didn't see that at that time. And something really powerful that my mom said to me was, this person is not family, because I had some pretty unhealthy family relationships where, because they're family, you kind of keep loving them anyway, even if they don't treat you well. And not that that's healthy. That's just what I was doing at that time in my life. And she said, this person is not your family. you don't need to keep loving this person. Like, you need to step away from it. So that kind of opened up my eyes as like, maybe if you have a bad relationship with your dad or brother and they're verbally abusive, but you just keep loving them because they're your brother, they're your dad, they're your uncle, whoever it is. Well, this man, he's not your family. And so you don't need to love him despite all of the issues.
No, that's really good advice, because I think a lot of women, from what I've been hearing, are in these relationships and keep giving them second chances because they believe that they will change.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I do think that people can change. You can always be better, but it has to be your idea. So if they're sweet talking you, saying that they will change and they don't, I think if it's a pattern, you need to believe it. And were there enough patterns for you to finally be like, okay, isn't going to work?
Oh, girl, yes. So many times over and over again. Like I said, like 7 to 8 times that I know of that he was caught, cheating on me or with other women through messages or photos, etc. It was just so unhealthy, so toxic. And yeah, it was something that I really had to look at, like, hey, what do I want long term? Do I want to be dealing with this forever? Heck no. And I wish I would have made that realization from the beginning. And like you said, like, yeah, people can change, but if they keep showing you who they are, believe them, believe their actions.
Mm-hmm. That was a mic drop moment there. I need you to all listen to that. When they show you who they truly are, believe them.
Exactly.
So you get out of this toxic relationship, you win Miss USA, you now live in New York, and you have this year that you're trying to make the absolute most of. Was the transition into that role pretty easy for you? What did you struggle with? What was that year like for you?
The year overall was great. I'm a very cup half full kind of person. So it was absolutely amazing. I was very blessed. I got to experience so many things that I never would have experienced if I were not Miss USA. I got to speak on Capitol Hill about ovarian cancer awareness and do my part to raise more funds for research and hopefully a cure at some point. So those kind of experiences, being in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, competing for Miss Universe, like all of it, so many great things. And I think it's also important to really keep it real with your listeners, with people that are interested. So I also had really hard times. There were so many highs, but there were so many super low lows. I experienced depression during my year as Miss USA. It was something that I honestly did not truly know where it came from because, again, I'm a cup half full kind of person. So I would be in an amazing moment, speaking on Capitol Hill, whatever it was, and in my mind, be so thankful and know that I should be overwhelmed with joy for this really great moment in my life. But I would be on the verge of tears, and my emotions felt like they were out of control in sadness and depression and anxiety. So a lot of Miss USAs actually experience depression or anxiety during their year. It's just a lot of pressure. You're thrust in the public eye. People are very critical of you as a person, physically, or the way that you carry yourself. And you are also completely removed from family and friends. You're in a city that most people don't even know. I had never been to New York. And you're working full time, living in a new place, and you don't get to see your family or friends almost ever. So it was definitely a hard time, but I'm very thankful to the Miss Universe organization because they also provide a therapist to any and every Miss USA at no additional cost. They take care of that for you. So they definitely take care of their girls to make sure that you can be in a good place and get back to a good place.
That's so important that you touched on both mental health and therapy, because I think that's something that a lot of people are finally not feeling as much shame around. We can talk about it, and it normalizes it with other people that even though you are at one of these highs, probably a high of your entire life, even though you were struggling with depression, you were able to really work through that. And I think it's important that we have such an interesting idea of what depression looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And were you surprised then when you were able to put a label on it and be like, where did this come from? And what kind of helped you pull yourself out of that?
Yeah, it was, I was just so thankful for the therapy. And I just want to touch on kind of what you mentioned is like, we see celebrities that maybe take their own life, like Robin Williams, who brought so much joy to so many people. He was such a light in the world. And we you think, oh, this person has it all, and you don't know what's going on. And sometimes it's a chemical imbalance and sometimes it's situational. But I think these kind of things being brought into the light can really help others. So if there is anybody out there that's struggling with anxiety or depression, I would definitely suggest like going to a therapy, going to a doctor. There's so many different ways that people experience depression or anxiety, and getting help is the number one thing. That's part of my coaching. I coach pageant girls, and literally one of the parts of my first coaching session, I always tell girls, know that it's okay to get help. If it seems weird for you from like your parents are telling you it's weird, let me tell you it's not. So if anybody's listening, getting help, it's normal. It's okay. It's great. It's fun. It's, you might be in a hard time and then you realize like, oh, like I am okay because of the therapy and because of talking it out. So it's I think therapy is one of the best tools out there to help with anxiety and depression.
I couldn't agree with you more. I finally got myself in therapy over the last year, and I was so nervous to ask for help because I've always thought like it's not okay to not be okay. You need to just keep going and it will pass. And it was one of those same things you were just talking about, that once I was actually in therapy, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is transformative. I never could have gotten here on my own. Yeah. So I think that's why I've talked so much about it. And I love that you're touching on it too. And the more you were talking about having depression and anxiety while you're in the spotlight like that, is you're judged by your outer appearance daily. And there's such a strong comparison culture. Do you feel like you still kind of deal with some of that knowing you're still in the public eye, or did it get easier over time?
Oh, I definitely deal with it. But I also think a lot of the judgment I put on myself. And I know as women that is natural and that happens sometimes, but I'm very aware of it. So I also am very intentional with my thoughts and do the mental work to counteract that. But just as like a little background for your listeners, when I was Miss USA, I was, and I don't know if you even know this, Jordan, but I had a lot of people criticizing me for gaining weight. I gained about 12 pounds, I would say, by the end of the year. And I had people calling me fat, saying I looked like I was pregnant, like I was a terrible Miss USA because I got pregnant from my fiance. And I'm like, what? No. All these things. And she's a bad example just because of my physical body size. I had criticism from the pageant community for sharing my relationship publicly. They said I should have hidden it because that's not what being a title holder is about. I had a lot of criticism for sharing my faith, and I was actually asked to share it less, although I never thought I shared it overboard. I just put like little happy moments in there with like a Bible verse, like treat others as you want to be treated, like little things.
Yeah.
But I received a lot of public criticism for those things. And then now, like moving forward to 5.5, 6 years, oh my gosh, 6 years later, I can't believe time is flying so fast.
I know, right?
To 6 years later, I like I said, I experienced it, but honestly, a lot of it comes from myself. Like I occasionally get the, like, you're disgusting comments, and it's like, oh, someone's just trying to like be mean. Like I try my best not to let that sink in. But I'm in my late 20s, early 30s. I still deal with acne. I have a lot of emotional struggles that I'm dealing with, but I'm also intentional about counteracting that. So it still happens, still deal with it.
I had no idea that people were tearing you apart like that, which is just baffling to me, because I feel like to pick a woman apart by her physical appearance, especially when you're as beautiful as you are inside and out, I find it very difficult to tear somebody else apart. But I've also learned that jealousy is very ugly. And I've also learned that we have such an unrealistic standard on women that it is impossible to please everybody. So you'll always have those voices, no matter what you look like, no matter what you're going through. And sometimes those voices do plant a seed in our own minds. So I can relate to that I still am very hard on myself. I know a lot of women that are very hard on themselves. Are there specific things that you have to do to try and continue to gain confidence? Is it affirmations? Is it turning off social media sometimes? What works for you?
Ooh, okay. So pretty much everything you just said, but let me So I am in a habit right now, currently in my life, of deleting Instagram off of my phone every single day. So I upload it to, if I'm going to get on and do stories or post a photo and comment on some friends' photos, and then I actually delete the whole app from my phone. whether it's because it's just a waste of time and I find myself scrolling, or if I'm find myself comparing, I'm pretty good at the mental space and not comparing too much there. But I can even just judge myself like, oh, I have nothing going on. So, and I'm watching other people's lives and feel like I'm boring, like I have nothing to show, that kind of thing. So that, but also what I do to counteract those negative thoughts, deleting Instagram, that helps. Also speaking affirmations out loud. It's something that if you've never done it before, if someone listening, if they've never spoken affirmations out loud, it can feel uncomfortable in the beginning for sure, but saying good things about myself to myself. And I think it's also important to be aware of the negative voice in your head and intentionally counteracting that. There's a book, it's something about like your inner mean girl. And the book essentially labels that voice as an inner voice that's a mean girl. It's not really you. And it's acknowledging that voice. So, for example, Daniel and I got into a little tiff, my husband. And after, I thought to myself, ugh, you're so annoying. And then it wasn't just a thought. It was something that was like kind of deeply rooted in my soul. Like I really, really, truly felt it. And I immediately in that moment had to catch myself and said, no, you're not annoying. You have passion about whatever subject it was. And we can work on how we express ourselves, but there's nothing wrong with believing or feeling deeply about something. So it's just really intentionally speaking the opposite of those negative thoughts. And then those positive affirmations, like you said, like waking up in the morning and being like, this is the best day. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Like today's going to be amazing. I'm going to be so productive. And saying those things out loud, and even the self-love things, telling myself, you look beautiful. And it's funny because you would think that a Miss USA would have no problem saying that, but I really do struggle a lot with my skin. And I look in the mirror often enough and think, I feel bad for your husband. He has to look at your face every day. Like I think that those kind of thoughts to myself often. So it's literally looking in the mirror and saying, you are beautiful, and trying to truly believe it. So you wouldn't think I'd struggle with it, but I do.
Well, you're human. And I think it's so powerful that you're able to talk about it and realize that it is a struggle. And you had said something too, that we need to feel our emotions. You know, so many of us try and correct that emotion, or if you feel it and you feel it deeply, it's you don't take time to acknowledge that. And I think that's why so many people will struggle so much internally and not be able to get it out. We have to get in a rhythm of being able to be like, no, this is what I'm struggling with. This is okay, but how do I switch it? How do I counteract it? Just like you were saying. It's crazy to hear that somebody as beautiful as you would struggle saying that stuff out loud. And that's why it's so important that you just said that, because we have so many women listening to this that think that just because you are a pageant girl, because you're a public figure, because you have a high social media following, means that you don't struggle. And it's so important for me to get that message across that just because you have those things doesn't make you any less human.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think we have to not only give grace to ourselves, but give grace to other people before you think about criticizing them or belittling them or their emotions just because they don't seem like they're the same as yours.
Exactly. And it's so easy to see people on social media and be like, oh, they have it all. Their life is perfect. But we never know what's going on behind closed doors. So I think just that kindness, like that kindness to yourself, like you said, but also kindness to others, because you don't know what people really have going on.
Nope, you have no idea. And I love that on social media, you say it's a highlight reel and keeping it real. And you had done a post a couple weeks ago about filters and then talking and opening up just about your journey with acne. And I know that that's something that has been a struggle ongoing throughout the last few years. And the fact that you were taking that power and talking to people about it and saying, hey, if you struggle with this, I get it too. Did you get an overwhelming response by women being like, oh my God, thank you?
Yes, I had so many responses because nowadays on Instagram, we are all, myself included, using those filters like crazy, even to post photos and to, especially do our Insta stories. So like you mentioned, I did a few posts on stories in a row, taking the filter off. Did the first one with my favorite filter and Paris filter, then the next one with just one. And then the final one with no filter on. And even then I had makeup on, so it wasn't completely raw, but I did have an overwhelming response of women saying, I struggle too. I'm dealing with acne as well. I have melasma as well. And they shared with me that it made them feel better to know that someone that they looked up to and they followed on social media also had the same struggle. I think it's important for us to really keep it real with our people, even, no matter what your circle is. If your circle is 50 followers, 50,000 followers, whatever it is, we need to keep it real. And it's fun to do the beauty filters and all of that. But I think those moments of being honest kind of put a little like reality check out there for everyone. I think it's important.
I think it's really important. And you had even inspired me because I was thinking about that post a couple weeks ago and I had a filter on my face. And right after I took the filter off because I'm like, ooh, that one's intense.
Mm-hmm.
And right away it was like, oh my God, I can't do it without a filter.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly I need all of these changes to my face that I haven't even thought about. But because of this filter, I know how much better I would look with it. And it makes me think, if we in our 20s and 30s can think that way, what do we think the younger generation is thinking? What are they growing up around? So it's important to have role models like you to actually be able to turn to and be like, no, you don't need to change anything to be beautiful. You can be natural, and that's still a beautiful thing.
And I loved when you shared about it. I saw where you're like, okay, I'm taking off the filter.
Well, I was inspired by you.
Thanks, girl. And I saw it and I was like, this is so good. But also when you did it, I was like, stop it. You're perfect. You're so beautiful. But we all have our comparison things.
Yep. We're our own toughest critic.
Exactly.
Because then we can look at that. You can look at my post without a filter and think it's beautiful. And I look at yours and I'm like, no, you're beautiful. I want to look like you.
Yeah.
And it's like, that never really changes. And it's funny being in pageantry too, because I think there's a lot of comparison culture there that you have to really get over in order to be able to rally around the girls that you're surrounded by, or else it can be crippling.
Absolutely. And I like the idea of the way that we speak to ourselves being your own best friend. Because think about how you speak to your girlfriends who you truly like look at and you think they're so beautiful and you're like, oh, girl, I love your hair. Oh, your makeup is on fire today. Like you pump up your girlfriends. But do you do that to yourself? Often we criticize ourselves when we look in the mirror, not all the time, but I feel like we need to be our own girlfriend. We need to look in the mirror and pump ourselves up and tell ourselves how much we love each other and how great our hair looks today. Like we need to pump ourselves up the same way that we would to a girlfriend.
Amen. I love that so much.
Mm-hmm.
And like we had said before, it's been 6 years now since Miss USA, which is so crazy. It feels like a lifetime ago, but also like yesterday.
Exactly.
What was that transition like for you after Miss USA is done and you're transitioning now into just life again? Was that difficult, or what did you go through during that time?
I would say it was really two-sided. So the difficult part of it was the life that you get used to as Miss USA, where your schedule is planned by somebody else. You have a manager. They're there with you almost 24/7, making sure you're ready to go, helping you out with anything you need, being with you at appearances, having a driver, all of these things. And then the minute that you are done being Miss USA, like, I mean, I love MUO, but there's not even a car organized for you to get back to your hotel. Like you have the hotel room for one more night and then that's it. So it was a really big adjustment from, getting a schedule emailed at 5 p.m. the night before every day, knowing what's next, to being completely on my own schedule. But it was also freeing. And I was very thankful for that part of the transition. I kept myself busy. I got married 3 months later, so that'll keep anybody busy.
Mm-hmm.
And I had about 2 months straight of appearances. So I lived out of 2 suitcases for 2 months before my wedding. So I'm the kind of person, if I'm ending one chapter of life, I like to have something else planned, something to look forward to. And as you know me through just life and social media, I'm always doing that with travel now. I'm like, okay, we're doing life, but in 3 months, let's go to Mexico or let's go here. Try to keep it interesting. So
I love it.
Kept it busy after Miss USA.
Which I think is really important. And you've touched on your husband, and I do want to go into that relationship just because I think that your relationship is so wonderful. I remember watching Daniel's reaction when you won, when you guys were then dating, to him being your fiance, to now. So going from that toxic relationship, you obviously had very high standards when you met Daniel. How did that relationship, or how did you treat that relationship differently with those past experiences?
I love this. And I feel like we could do a whole podcast together talking about relationships because
We totally could.
Yes, relationships are one of my favorite things to talk about. So to try to break it down into just a few quick bullet points, I'm not overwhelming with too many thoughts. One was I first invested a lot of time into truly loving myself and knowing what I was looking for. A book that helped me do that was The Secrets of an Irresistible Woman. I forget the name of the author. It's a pink book, a Black author, a woman. She's so much fun. The way that she speaks, you feel like, or that she writes, you feel like you're hearing her speak. And it's just life-changing. So that's one. I invested in loving myself, learning who I was and what I wanted, and reading that book. Then number two, after that, I created for myself it started off as a 2-date rule. I said I wouldn't go on more than 2 dates with any man, so I'm not going to waste their time or my time if I didn't see them potentially being the one. And that really quick got dwindled down to a 1-date rule. I was like, why would I even go on a second date if he's not potentially the one? Like, nope, not going to waste my time or his time. And then, so all of these things, just really getting clear on what I wanted, what I was looking for, but also being the type of person that essentially that I wanted to date. If I wanted to date someone that was driven and focused and strong in their faith, I need to also be that type of person. You attract what you put out there. So long story short, with meeting Daniel, we met, we connected. He checked off all the things on my non-negotiable list and many more kind of checkpoints beyond that. So we continued to date, and it just developed. And he's the most amazing man ever. He's supportive. He is like a bundle of joy. Like he's the happiest person in the world. And he keeps life interesting. That's for sure.
You guys are awesome.
Lots of communication. That's important. Learning how each other communicates too, because we both had different communication styles from our childhood. And you have to find a way that works for you in your new relationship, like a way that works together. Communication. I feel like that's so important.
So important. And it seems so easy, but you have to put a lot of work in to make sure that you guys are communicating the way that is effective for your partner. Like you said, you had different communication styles.
Yeah.
Well, for all of these ladies that want to get a session by you or want to sign up for one of your self-defense classes, where can they find you? Do you have any coming up? Spell out your deets.
Yeah. Okay. I love this. So I have a lot of things on the horizon. If you're a pageant girl and you're listening, just simply go to Nia Coaching, that Instagram account, and everything is there. My email, the links that you can click to sign up for coaching, super easy. When it comes to self-defense, you can follow my Nia Self-Defense Instagram account. I don't have any current workshops coming up because of COVID and just trying to respect people's safety and all of that at the time, and most things are shut down. I am looking to potentially doing a workshop in Florida in November, but we're going to have to figure out with social distancing how it would work. So that's it. If honestly though, Real Nia Sanchez, my Instagram account, I will post all of the things there. So you can follow me there and you'll figure out all the information through social media there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on and for being just an open book. You're, like I said at the very beginning, an incredible woman, an amazing role model, and I'm very, very honored to call you a friend.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
So there you have it. I hope you got just as much out of this episode as I did. Please take a second to rate and review the podcast. And remember, you are so much more than whatever label's been placed upon you. We'll see you next week.